Surprise. Wow. Take a couple days off and some amazing stuff happens. It was so good to listen to Lori and Steve. Um, Amazing job. Kudos to you, Lori. Before we get too far, thank you. Thank you for tuning in again to Tug of Heart. This is episode 102, and we've got some cool stuff in the works that I think will be exciting. And if not for you, it's exciting for us. So let's all just be happy about that. Lori, how are you?
Good. If you're not happy about us, be happy for us.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Does that hold up? I don't think so, but whatever. I'm good. We missed you so much. How are you doing?
Yeah, I know. I saw the memo. You missed me, but your aim's improving. Got it.
We were trying to talk about Hearts United, and we were just kind of waiting for the cleaner to come in and just make everything a little more concise for us.
Not the case here, but I definitely had questions. So this is going to be kind of imagine me as your audience listening to you. I got questions. And this is what we always encourage people to do is write to us, call us, comment, and so I've got questions. This is like your first face-to-face, like, okay, I listened to you. Now I've got questions.
Okay.
How do you feel about that?
Fine. Ready.
Excellent. So as we listened to your podcast about Hearts United and we start getting into a lot of different things, but first and foremost was unity.
Oh, right.
Unity, unison, united. And you open this up to like, in unity, we should have welcome all. This is what I got from listening to you. Like you're encouraged to include. The heart wants to include people. It wants to. Mm-hmm. I got to be honest, Lori, as I sat here and I reflected on my own world, my walls, I would define it this way. Unity at its core is the isolation and respective union of hearts. Because in a union, part of what makes it a union is the exclusive membership. So in my marriage is my wife and I. And we actually formed that union, and I'll get to the bond part after, but we formed that union because it is respective of all other relationships. And it is special in that it is just us. And that's where we find sanctuary. That's where we find and retreat to when all that's out there has just put miles on us.
Right.
And we need to recuperate. So that was my first question. Like, you spoke so much about this unity, and it sounded a whole lot like a unity of the world, like just like kumbaya, like let's bring it in, and not the way that I feel. Did I miss something?
I'm not sure how you heard it, but I would start by saying it's at least being open and not immediately dismissive or disclusive based on preconception at minimum. Okay. And it's also saying that it's not union as if like we're all going to house together now, or even necessarily, I don't even believe that communities have to all interact, and as a must. They can and should enjoy one another, but I think that we don't require a certain type of thinking to simply love somebody and to have an acknowledgement of their personhood and their includedness in what it means to be human. That's where I would start with that. Now, you mentioned marriage. Well, that's a specific relationship, and there is a purpose for that. But if you fall into a marriage, choose to, the covenant of marriage, if you think about it, that in and of itself, traditionally, if it's not so much anymore, so be it, I can accept that. But traditionally, that would grow a community. It would go from two who have decided we are together, we will remain together. And from that, you have the living proof, which is a child. And the child points back to what you guys say you are to one another, in that you guys are saying we're forever. Because a child, as they're never, ever, ever, ever can be another. And again, this is traditionally, not talking about adoption or anything like that. But you can only say this, I am a child because this mother had me, right? Only one woman ever had it. I'm not saying that another cannot mother. I don't want to get into anything off topic with that. But so in the way that a child, like if I have my children, they're my child. There is no undoing that, right? That is my child. And so that's evidence that that's the way I see that original union, in the same kind of purity where I am for yours as you are mine, in a way that's irreversible. There's no undoing it, as much as there's no undoing the fact that I have had this child.
You use the word evidence, but wouldn't children also bring to the table evidence of the singularity of unity, or the respective nature of unity? Because as much as you adore your child, that is not something that is universally applied, because your friends may come over and you could have had a fantastic relationship prior to the birth of a child. And for whatever reason, your former companion, friend, just doesn't feel the same about your child. And so at least the way that I was feeling about it or assessing it, is that unity is a very private, and I know that there are different types, but when we talk about hearts united, it is really hard to celebrate the union between a mother and a child and a neighbor and a father and a coworker. You know what I mean? It is really the mother and the child that have a union that is unlike any other. And so for that reason and that reason only, I still go back and I feel like that is singular. It is a exclusive membership between a mother and a child.
Right. But if you make a friend, you're not asking them to be your child. You're asking them to be a friend. And
you're asking them to join the union. At least this is the way it came out in
to be united in we talked about united, and it goes back to the idea of happiness, which we'll get into following this. But to be united, at least in holding a respectable working area or ground, distance if it needs to be that, approach if it needs to be that, but holding whatever needs to be held to make it possible for others to pursue their happiness and their life at the same time you do. So in union, it's at least an agreement to do that. And union is also kind of understanding that we're made of the same, we are related. When you and I grew up, I'm pretty sure our father raised us thinking, like, I remember me and you used to always be like, everyone in the world is our brother and sister. You say all the time, like, but they're actually my brother. My dad's, you would tell me, Lori, dad's really our brother too. And it didn't take away anything from his fatherhood. It was just that you were acknowledging that among men, there's this attachment that is kind of like siblings, a kinship, like
biblically speaking.
No, just a kinship, in that kin is like kind. There is something that makes us the same kind in human, that makes us, we're not angels, we're not beasts. That sounds biblical, but I think we can agree that we humans have something specific where, it's been far and few between that people go hang out in the woods with animals, because there is something akin to other humans.
So I came out with this, and I came out with this in a, not an oppositional approach, but I came out with this as a candidly different, reception of your take. And in that, I can move to the next part, which is how important the relationship is with interpretation. Because conflict, which you and I are somewhat polarizing, not entirely, but somewhat polarizing in this topic, conflict does not necessarily introduce an alternative to unity, because you and I as twins are united in this discussion. Yes. And you had a lot to say about that, because that is part of what declares unity between you and I, is our willingness to
return to the conversation,
to be polarizing.
Right. It's giving you permission to be so polarizing that had I not had a kind of commitment in my heart, I'd sever that. Or you might with me. There's time. Me and you have gone extreme here, where if it was anybody else, we'd walk. You know that, and I know that. That's the truth of it. But so what we're talking about here is kind of opening that up to everybody, where I don't, in terms of unity, I don't cut off contact with a person or communicating simply because they think different. Now, if they endanger me or somebody, or their thinking pushes me into an area that's really damaging to my heart, that's a different thing, right? But for them to be able to express their thoughts, it's not a requirement to be united, to hold a job together. Say we both work at a bank, and I'm like, you can't work here if you think like that. And the reason that I bring this up is because there are people, Leroy, today that think this. This guy's just a Neanderthal. He can't work with us cool, new, modern thinkers. There's no room for him here. And this is actually happens, where people will go and complain. And this is the canceling, right? Cancel culture. When people will not have no intention of being united with people simply that do not think like them. And so I think it's making a case against that, for starters. Why is it a requirement to think like people to be able to work alongside them?
If this was Chutes and Ladders, you'd be cornering a win.
But it's more dynamic?
No, I think that's a good explanation. I had another question. As I sat here in part one, you were talking about, and I'm going to say all of these because it came in several different forms, but you talked about bondage, bonded, bound, and binding.
Right. Okay.
So, and these are all variations of the word bond.
Right.
Bond, many would use synonymously with unity. So when you think about, I think too many people have watched 50 Shades of Grey. And so bondage has a, not nefarious, but it certainly has a different, it evokes something in us when we talk about bondage, like, wow, bondage. But aren't we desirous of being bound to a loved one? Because when we get married, the wedding ring represents the bond, the circle, the no end, no beginning, no end. It's just there's a bond there. And when this ends, with loved ones, we were talking about bondage, and bondage sounded like when I listened to the podcast, it sounded like an unwillingness. But so let's just say we enter into a relationship and we're desirous of being bound to that person whom we hold in high regard and whom we love at the depths of our ability at that time. But when that ends, the memories remain, ensuring absolute bondage, if only to the memory of the experience. So instead of bondage being this kind of taboo thing, isn't that just really a benchmark for unity?
You answered your own question when you said, when you say bondage, it connotates.
No. I understand that because I asked the question. I'm asking about you.
Oh,
do you not recognize it at a certain level that way?
Yeah, but I think for me too, the answer is right there in when you mentioned the unwillingness with bondage. And here's the thing: nobody said it's easy. Nobody said that you always want to, only that you're willing. So, for instance, if I give you just permission, let's think of something a whole lot easier to picture without anything anxiety inducing. Maybe a little bit, but not to the level of being in human bondage. Okay, me and you, I say, Leroy, I want to get in shape. I need you to hold me to it. Okay. And
get a Fitbit.
And you're over here pounding on my door at 5 a.m. and I'm like, I don't want to go. And you're like, we're going. You made me promise I would make you. So that's not bondage though, because in my free will, I asked you to keep me bound to what I mean in this moment. And that's where you get what's known as, I guess, a covenant, a promise. What I say today, my yes today, I want to be held to. In my free will, make me. And that's different than for somebody to be kidnapped and forced into marriage, or somebody to just constantly tell you, hey man, you're jiggling, baby, let's go work out. And you never brought it up to begin with. Or if somebody's constantly saying, you're going to eat that, you're going to eat that, you're going to eat that, when you have not asked for the input. It's very different to me. Right?
I'll get back to you on that. I'd have to think about that.
But it is different because one is invited and is in both parties have agreed to this binding, which is like a contract, but contracts are broken. But it's a binding is a promise, a deeper promise. And so I think bondage is when you are kept somewhere, whether through coercion, your parents are really, through shame. A lot of people, and again, I'm talking specifically because we kind of went into politics and ideologies. I'm talking specifically now. Through coercion, there are so many young in the world today, and I am going to say this because I do believe it, that claim to believe things they do not believe because of coercion, because they are afraid to say different. In universities, there have been quiet studies done, and it's no mistake that there are the same party among almost every professor. But when they ask in a private way, they conduct studies, there's a very tiny percent that are not of the same mindset, but they don't share it with the others. So they think everybody educated thinks like this. You have to be an idiot not to. But 2 out of the 10 aren't necessarily thinking that. They just don't say otherwise because you're canceled. And guess if you do manage to survive and not be canceled, you will never be funded. If your beginning question for any study does not line up with an assumption of what you believe and hold as priority, you will not get funding. So people tend to talk in a way that isn't true to their heart for survival. It's not a good trade, in my opinion.
Perfect segue to go back to what we actually started with, which is Hearts United and bondage and the bond. um, I think that I mean, I literally have to say, I just can't agree.
Okay.
Love you to death, just can't agree.
But you're
Because
still safe here. You're still safe here because we have united hearts,
on the contrary, you're still safe here.
right? Neither of us has shut off our computers yet. That's the point. You make my case by disagreeing.
So what I'm trying to get is that why and Lori, I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to figure things out as I go, and you're responsible for that. But why does bondage have to be unwilling? When to me, that is a level at which we hold the things that we consider of the highest regard. Relationships,
right? It's
just the most meaningful of relationships.
It's not given that verbiage for it. That's all. Unless you're a masochist, it's just considered against your will. But if part of you enjoys that, that's fine. This is just a technical difference we're talking about. You would call it binding or bound. We're bound to one another. I don't
completely.
Yeah, but I don't. I'm not here because you force me. You don't give me money to show up. You don't. Gosh, I mean, I might show up more if you did, but that would be something outside of being united for the sake of unity.
So with semantics out of the way,
mm-hmm.
I see where you're going. I mean, and I started this with saying like how important the relationship with interpretation, because I think I'm taking a much more literal and you're taking a much more modern day America definition of bondage.
I find mine contrary to modern day America, because I think anybody should be welcome to our discussion if they have a different view. I don't think.
I get that. You don't think.
And I don't think you should be required to think. No, but just say a work relationship. Two teachers, two mechanics, whatever you want to, a group of mechanics, okay? The bankers, let's stick with the bankers. Different people work at a bank, and somebody doesn't think like the rest, and if they cannot freely express their heart, I don't see things like that. That's not the way I was raised. I come from a family of a different culture, of a different thinking, and nobody again talks to you. Then your choice is to never mention that again because it seems to break union, right? Then that's a false unity. It's a true unity is where there is different types of thinking and there is room for that. You can still eat lunch with me. I don't suddenly, get interested in my fingernails walking down the hall because I don't want to lock eyes with you because you are one of them.
Wow, two completely different takes. I see where you're going. I champion that train of thought. I guess maybe, just maybe, I prefer the more vintage, romanticism about being bound to one another.
Yeah, we can't confuse this with more exclusive, intimate, or special relationships. We're talking about hearts united. There's so many different types of relationships within that.
So I wrote this. I said, are matrimonial oaths forced, or are they a welcome form of binding?
They're both.
Is binding not bondage? Do we not take comfort in the betrothed pledging their intention to be bound to us? Does the symbolism of being bound elevate in importance when vows are exchanged? So it's like this, every step from meeting and declaring the exclusivity of a relationship, and maybe I'm just thinking about relationships in terms of romantic relationships, and you're thinking of them more in a work and, interested in fingernails. But and I guess I take it, the best experience I have with being bound to another human is probably family or spouse.
Right. And how do we explain that 50% divorce if bondage is good? It's because that
It's because
bondage
the interpretation,
it gets their will at some point. They have dissolved that because they find themselves unwilling to remain in that.
because somewhere we've identified bondage, the bond, the union, the unity, in unison, the team, the two-person cohort, we've identified that is an unwilling bondage, is an unwilling event. And in fact, I think it is the most special and most coveted and highly prized of all relationships, is the bondage between a husband and a wife, or in today's world, I'm not here to challenge you, whatever the alternative lifestyle may be, but it is that bond,
right?
You know, and equally special with family. The bond we have with our children is not something that we can discount, walk away, or cheapen by saying that it's unwilling. It is, or in my eyes, should be of the highest caliber.
There is something romantic about a child is bound to be your child no matter what. And in that capacity.
You know what? In modern day America, I'm going to go ahead and say it. That's actually not true. We're currently fighting. When I say we, I'm saying society is currently fighting to cut the strings of bondage between a pregnant mother. And I'm not here to decide. I'm not a judge or jury, but they are literally fighting to amputate or sever the strings of bondage between a mother and a fetus, an unborn child. Right. And I'm not telling you it's right or wrong. I'm just saying
it is bondage. Why should I be in bondage? Why should my body be in bondage? And that's that. I think that is my point, because for me, I see it as quite naturally being bound. Or I would pray for greater bondage so that child hangs on to life and I would not miscarry for me, right? So that is what I'm saying, that it depends on the perspective. And so when I was saying unity, one of those perspectives will hang on to the child, will remain united, one will not. That's it.
Well said.
And it is sacrificial. To be a mom is sacrificial. It's not that it's less pain for a mom who chooses to remain bound or in bondage and have a child. It's not that it's not conditional. You're the one that actually had taught me this, where, well, if time was more right, or no, a mom suffers this, there's no guarantee what physical strain you're going to have in pregnancy or after. There's no premonition of the heartbreak involved in raising that child. It's equal for all, but some agree and some just do not. And I think I won't say, abortion is such a triggering thing, which is another thing we said. You can't even add a name to it because people run to their end of the polls, right, and start pulling. But the fact is, it's if we don't even look at that topic, but just relationships in general with family, where it's even a question of how much authority schools have versus a family, who a child is more bound to, and who their thought processes should be more dedicated to, right? Or just in general, friends stay friends or don't stay friends, or marriages stay married or do not. It speaks a lot about, to me, in modern society, a kind of selfishness that we're in the middle of. And if selfish is by the self, and that's a lonely place to be, is my view.
Well done, Lori. Well done. I do. That's a great place to be. I think it is a clear understanding. For you, I'm still lost.
No, and it's okay that we disagree. That's my point, is that
Yeah.
we still belong. That's it, belonging. All right.
Like, share, comment, argue, bring your enthusiasm.
Insult.
No insulting. We don't like that. Check out Strong Island. They're the ones that give us this platform. And thank you for tuning in. And we'll see you next time when we're going to talk a little bit about happiness.
Happy. Until
Adios.
then, farewell.